So this is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Colette Hamon. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks, Phantom.
So I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You probably see that icon up there. And because of that, we actually have a coupon code for people today. If you use coupon code GHOST, you get free subscription on that platform. That's an audio-only platform. And we're featured on there later today. The audio version of the podcast will be on Newsly. And if you use that coupon code, you can listen to that for free. That's Ghost. And then today, we've actually reached episode 1000 of the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We've been on the air since 2016, tracking that on Apple Podcasts. So that's it. That we finally
What
hit
a
that mark.
milestone. I'm happy to be 1,000.
Yeah, we hit the episode.
I wouldn't
today.
normally say that to a man, Phantom.
So that's something we've been trying to reach for. And we've got your website up, the French Postcard.ca. That will be fully clickable when people, when we're published. It's not clickable now, but for people listening, it's www.frenchpostcard.ca. And today we're going to talk about the power of a conscious relationship. And we're going to tell your story because you're an entrepreneur, CEO, brand builder. Mm-hmm. So you might want to introduce yourself to the audience and tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and then we can dive into all the other items we're going to talk about today.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. So I'm originally a farm girl from, we have provinces in Canada, the province of Saskatchewan. So I was raised in a lot of grit, perseverance, and hard work. And initially moved to one city called Saskatoon, which is about 200,000 people. And then around 22 years old, thought, you know what, I'm going to move to a bigger city with a lot more going on. Ended up in Calgary, Alberta. And while trying to figure out what to be in life, which has ranged from admitted to the College of Engineering, I have pursued my MBA. I have pursued law degrees that I never ended up completing. I worked several years in oil and gas. We're a big energy city here. And eventually started this store while searching for a sports bra. And I had no idea what I was doing. And that's how most entrepreneurs get into their businesses if they don't inherit them. And was an optimist. Put everything I had into it, grew it, blew it up. And I have two brands. One's BraTopia, which is really focused on lingerie and swimwear. And then we launched French Postcard a few years ago, which is more on intimacy devices and focused on sexuality.
Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting story. So you're a brand maker, you're a CEO, entrepreneur, and you found your own way. Like a lot of creative people, I talk to creative people, we started a podcast talking to artists. And artists can be, a lot of times the creative spark is entrepreneurship too. And it's just that people find that like they don't fit within the structure of somebody else's business. They have their own ideas.
So
relatable. It's like, yeah, I mean, as an artist, like we have our own ideas. We want to put it out. So, as if you're a poet, you're a writer, you're a musician, you're a filmmaker, you got a vision, and your vision is your business. Where I vision might be my song or my poem or a novel or something. But you talk about like how that is to actually actualize your dream and actually take something that's your idea and own it.
Oh, of course. It's an incredible, but also a painful journey, probably like most great things in life. And just like, even when I think about how it came to me and had no idea what to do, but then the other piece is you have to also come up with the money. And that's the painful part is I've never taken something and put so much money that was my own risk into it with no certain results. It's really like the statistics of entrepreneurs are not good, yet there's so many of us that would not have it any other way. There's a fantastic expression I'll butcher. It's something like we'd rather work 80 hours a week for ourselves than 40 for someone else. And that's entrepreneurs are always such unique people in that we don't handle usually structure, rules, maybe a bit the law, but even then there's some gray. So, but no, it's been such a journey, and that's what I love.
Well, being able to take it's that risking. I think a lot of people like avoid risk for security. right? They don't take their dream because it's like, well, that's too scary to take on and then not know it's going to work. So they want the security, but then they're not happy. So it's
This
like a lot
this is
of
actually
times
part of my
later they get to a
story.
point where it's like, well,
I see
yeah,
this
yeah,
so
maybe talk about how
often.
that
Of
comes.
course.
Yeah.
Um, so it's very interesting because as much as I was raised in entrepreneurship on the farm, I never viewed it that way. And my parents separated, and my mom's goal was to find security because now she was a single mom with me, and she wanted to make sure she had a safe, secure way to keep us under housing and fed and have a good life. So she worked at the government. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. This is great. I'm going to get a government job. And I remember at first being shocked that at 19 years old, I was going to make all this money. And then as I continued on, chasing a life of security. I remember before 20, I owned a house, I bought a car, and I did all these things that probably most 19, 20-year-olds don't do. And then I remember going on a huge international trip. And I went to Italy and I went to Egypt and I saw these amazing things and met all these great people and came back to work and I was so depressed. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go see a counselor. And I remember feeling shame about even having to do this back then. And so I snuck into this guy's office I knew existed, and a friend of mine had seen him and started describing what I was going through. And God bless him, I love this man because he sarcastically rebuts to me. He's like, so you just went and saw like the pyramids of Giza and walked through vineyards in Italy, and you're back in a gray cubicle answering tax questions, and you have no idea why you're depressed.
Yeah.
And then he continued to
Yeah.
tell me he didn't usually get 22-year-olds having a midlife crisis, but we would work together, and we did. And that's where he kind of encouraged me that maybe you've outgrown where you are now, and maybe a life of entrepreneurship is what you wanted. And I remember always having that in me, but having this fear, like, how do you make that leap from the safest job in the world, working for the government until you collect a pension, to never having certainty? Anything can throw off a business or annihilate what you've created. So that was a large part of my journey. But coming to Calgary, which it's a highly entrepreneurial kind of action-based city. Nobody's from here usually. They've moved here for someone else. Always things coming and going. It was neat to see that energy. And so I took a transfer with the government, keeping my life safe. And then I thought, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to go work in oil and gas. Look at all the money you can make. So it was really chasing money and high salaries. I made a lot of life choices. And then the implied checklist would have been part of my safety and security as well. And so making sure that I got married and had 2.5 children and the white picket fence, and that I was doing all these things that were expected societally. And that's where finally I remember hitting a real hard wall, thinking like, shouldn't this stuff feel better? Like, I make all this money and I have a husband, I have kids, I just built a custom home. Shouldn't I feel happier about all this? And that was like the first crack where I was like, something's not right about this, but I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to further explore it at that time.
Yeah, a lot of times what it seems what I've run into is kind of like if you live in the present moment and you kind of live in a flow state and you're kind of open to the muse, which is kind of the artistic mindset, then things
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people was like, well, you must have planned that. It's like a lot of times things come to you and then you kind of riff on it. And then you're able to use your creativity to like, oh, here's the opportunity. And it's not that it's like there's something going on in your subconscious, there's something going on in your logical mind, and then it suddenly you see it and then you act on it, and then it becomes like your purpose. So it sounds like in some ways, like the story of your BraTopia, like you went into that store and you couldn't find what you wanted, and then your mind started it's like, hey, I think I can do something here. So maybe you can kind of launch from that point.
Oh, for sure. And even what you're sharing, Phantom, this is so true that I totally believe, like, you have to believe that there's abundance out there and that the universe provides. And some people do that through organized religion, and I've chosen to do it just through spirituality. And so, but it's so true. When you are open to that and you become conscious that that's out there, everything starts appearing. And so even with, yes, I remember looking for a sports bra, not being able to find something supportive in my size that I didn't have to wear two of. And then all these other weird coincidences. Like I remember walking into a triathlon store, which I have nothing to do with triathlons in my life. And there was a woman working and she's like, oh, you know what we sell? Oprah's sports bra. And my only thought was like, Oprah's busty. This bra's got to work. And she showed it to me, but I had my baby in a baby carrier that day. And I thought, I can't do this today, but I'll come back. And then my second thought was everyone working there was men. If I go back and she's not working, I don't want to talk to a man about a sports bra nor my breasts. So I found online through a weird search engine, like where could I find Oprah's sports bra? Weird place in an odd location in an industrial area by appointment only. I get there. Find it again. I'm reunited with Oprah Sports Bra. Buy two of them. And I'm so happy because finally I can do all these workouts without breast pain. The lady and I start talking and I'm like, I have to tell you how I found you because it was really challenging and I didn't even know you existed. And I know other women that could use you. And she made this comment and she's like, oh yeah, the owner, she's doing so well at this business that she doesn't even want to market. And that was the seed. I thought if they are doing well in this odd location by appointment only in an industrial area, I can do this and I can do this better. And then everything started aligning. I reached out to someone and I'm like, how do I start? Like, where's point A? Like, even when I realized I was not happy, I'm like, where's point A to getting to happiness? You start somewhere. So I called someone. I'm like, what do I do? They said, go find a trade association. Every industry has an association. I'm amazed to this day, the ones I find that are absolutely unique, but it's true. And I found the lingerie show and it was coming up like within 2 weeks of all of this coming before me in Vegas, go to Vegas. And I'm like, okay, it's either going to be a trip to Vegas. I went to a trade show or the launch of this business. Once I delved into the industry, I thought this is an incredible industry. And I still saw the white space that wasn't being served in my city where I could really grow it. And I just jumped in. And some of it is like, you just have to have courage and get past fear. And this is where I am grateful to my farm background, because even yesterday I was laughing with this woman that teaches family constellations. It's like the theory about how we download what came before us up to 6 generations, whether we like it or not. And so I'm like, when you have grit, perseverance, my ancestors were pioneers and they lived in mud huts and they like lived through dust storms. By the time 2010 runs around, you have technology and running water, and I still have that in me. You just go for it. But it was very interesting to start. And the mistakes you make, you have to and that's the grit piece. You have to keep going. You have to not let it knock you down. And you walk through there, like there's days you feel like Rocky in the ring and you still have to smile and pretend you're having a wonderful day and that everything's going great. And these are the challenges that most people cannot hold space for or come out alive from in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea of like if you're a musician, most of your compositions are not going to make it, right? And so you don't look at it as a failure, right? You look at it as like an opportunity. And a lot of times it's the happy accident that actually that gets you to where you need to be. And you can be very directed, but a lot of times it's that flow state, it's that understanding that you can kind of, there is no real bad note. Like in music, there's a lot of concepts like where people want it perfection. But why I always kind of live in the happy accident because I'm a child of the 70s. And I like listening to like some of the older music. And if you listen real close, you can hear the errors in the mix. But it's like actually makes the song. And and part of the problem today, people try to be they try to be too perfect, right? And perfection kind of leads to boredom. Because it's like if you just make something totally sonically perfect, it doesn't have character. And that character, it comes from, the happy accident, the fact that you're willing to kind of go somewhere, maybe it's not like somebody else that is unique. It is uniquely you. It's your vision. And that's why, I always like singer-songwriters because it's like it's their vision. It's their idea, like the Dylans of the world. the people who,
Oh, I
yeah, the
love this.
Hendrix, the people who
I also
made the
just
choice to
went
do
to,
things different.
yes. And even that you're sharing this is funny because I just this summer went to the Neil Diamond musical, A
Oh
Beautiful
yeah,
Sound or
Neil Diamond's
something in
awesome.
New York. And that was his story. It was a weird, happy accident that one song got discovered. And because I was born at the last year of the 70s, I didn't realize how big he was in his prime, too. So the power of a happy accident,
Yeah,
there's a
he's real big.
million stories like this. That's why I love it.
Well, it's the idea of the music, kind of like in a flow state, like if you're open to it and you don't like pass on things because you're like, well, that's not good enough. Like you have limiting beliefs, it prevents your progression. Like if you thought trying to go for like the perfect thing, then you never are willing to put out things that are not things that aren't perfect. Sometimes are things that aren't what is going on. So if you put something out that doesn't match the current state, then people will say, well, there's something wrong with it. But you have to be willing to kind of,
Yes.
if you put something out there, people will find it. Like you said, that like this thing, the bra was in a place and this, like people, they didn't weren't even advertising and people were finding them. Cause that's the
Hmm.
idea. Like you put something in the universe and things like the law of attraction, things come to you.
This is so true.
And some
This
people
is
say,
so
well, you
true.
all have got to clone what already exists. And you don't always have to clone what already exists.
No,
You know what I mean?
no, exactly. And that's true. Like even what you're saying so resonates with me about how perfection leads to boredom. And I believe that in every area of life. That, and I mean, that's how I started. I started like even chasing the checklist is, oh, I have to appear perfect. I have to appear like I'm this compliant young lady that's going to do all the things that's expected of me and check off those boxes and live happily ever after until the happily wasn't there. And so, yeah, I see this a lot. It's painful to watch sometimes, but everyone has to do their own journey. And we're all going to hit different points of pain at different points in time. And there's this beautiful quote by Anais Nin, and it's there comes a point where it's more painful to stay a bud than to bloom, which, even in layman terms, it's like the pain of what you're going through has to be greater than the pain of change. And that hits different for absolutely everyone.
Yeah. You hit that point. You get that crucible moment. I've all these conversations I've had with the podcast, and in podcasting, there's kind of a thing. It's like most podcasts fail after 12 episodes because people like don't
Interesting.
hit their goal in like 12 episodes and they stop.
Okay.
And my whole thing was I did it because it was a way for me to connect, and it wasn't about being the biggest thing or being on the top 10 list or some list. It was because
Hmm.
I felt it was a way to connect to people. And being a musician, having experiences with people all over the world and not have to leave my studio gave me a lot of inspiration. It helps me. It helps me
I love
get
this.
ideas. It helps me connect, helps me communicate. And so that's how I was measuring it, is like it's helping me and my other things. And then eventually I start getting other benefits, but I wasn't trying to compare myself to other podcasters or other people in the area and say, well, I'm going to do it because I want to do it. Just like I do music. Like if
I
you're a
love it.
musician, a lot of musicians I started with when I was 17, if they didn't hit, they stopped and the guitar's just sitting there and they never picked it up again. And I've been playing since I was like 12 and never stopped. And because people was like, well, if you don't hit this, then it was like, well, you do it because you love it. If you love it,
Yes,
then it just happens, right?
this is
And
true.
it's just work, but it's like I think if you want to be creative, you find things to do. And if you have a failure, it's not really a failure. It's like it's a step on the way to where you really want to go.
Mhm. What you're sharing is so interesting to me too, Phantom. So one of the things I started accidental gifts from the universe. I watched a documentary from Artie Wu, who studies how our deprivation of creativity as a human race is killing us. And so even when you're
Mhm.
sharing what you do during the day. So many people pursue that, choose safety and security, never touch art, music, or any other creative ventures again. And that combination is like causing disease, depression, disconnection. And so I love that you've naturally figured this out. And even in my own life, there were things that I witnessed that didn't make sense until I started reading about the studies on what creative deprivation is doing to us. And there were even things that I remember seeing, different art things. Like there was paint nights at a bar, and these got so viral, and everyone was doing these. And then there was like barn signs or
Yeah.
all these things. And I'm like, what is the interest in it? But then it was this outlet where we could go and be expressive and creative and start tapping into that again. And I know one of the teachers even talked about, like, go to the dollar store and buy a little paint kit from the kids section and start there if you have to. And so then she talked about people will do that and then not touch it for 6 more months because they think, oh, I shouldn't do this. It's a waste of time. So I love that you've always had music.
Well, I think it's like art. Yeah.
Yes, and art and poetry and all of this that we give up to chase money.
What's catharsis? Well, it's catharsis. What I try to tell people is, like, you know, even in business wants people be in the cube, but then they also want creative people. And I kind of I got out of the corporate structure and I got into consulting. Yes. I got into consulting because it kind of matched my creative mindset. Because I started hitting a wall being an African American where I wasn't getting into the management. But being a consultant, I was able to still get in the room. Because I still get in the room because I'm a consultant. But I'm doing it because I go and work on projects I'm interested in. And I do stuff, but I do it kind of like I try to align my creative mindset with my business mindset to have my sense of security in terms of my money coming in. But I wanted to not be put into a cube. I didn't want to be put in that structure. So I work remote and I'm able to bring ideas to people. And the thing I always find that's really interesting in corporate America is they want to put people in the cube and then they bring people like me in and wondering, like, well, you need to let your people be like the way you're letting me be.
I know.
Right? But you want to force people into this structure, and you wonder why you're not succeeding as well as you could, because you're stifling
amazing ideas.
And if you would allow that creativity to come out, you know, and a lot of times I've talked to people, especially women, that, you know, the idea of creativity kind of goes back to, like, you know, sexuality is creative, you know.
It's so true.
The idea of creation. And people get, you know, they limit themselves because they get scared of that, because they're scared of sexuality. They're scared of creativity. They're scared they get so much fear. And then they don't remember what it was like when they were a kid to just try things and not care about the rules.
Exactly.
And it's like that mindset to be open, and to be open kind of goes toward that sexuality. And I'm kind of threading the needle to go into the interest, you know, your mindset of, like, you're into intimacy, you're into the why do women lose interest in sexuality, because I think people have got these hangups and they got these walls and they got these ceilings. It's like, how do you address that? Because, you know, people have told people, oh, stay away from that.
Oh, it's so Phantom. I love that you, like, what you're sharing took me years to discover and study. And I wasn't raised in as oppressive a situation as some, but no, this is true. So the two things, and they're also tied to our sacral chakra, is creativity and sexuality. And these are the two things we shut down the most in our lives if we're not conscientious of them and don't realize the impact that has on us. And it wasn't until my personal experiences, but also there's studies done on both these items and what that does to us. And so when you look at what we're energetic beings. And the other piece is energy is like atoms moving. And so if you shut down your sexuality, you're shutting down other parts of yourself, your essence, your energy, what you're fully capable of, your full essence. And people think they can choose, like, okay, I'll shut this down in me and I'll shut this down, but I want all these other pieces to be amazing. And it doesn't work that way. And this starts early. Like, it's the first place it's going to start is in the home. Like, what were the parental messages that you received about your body, sexuality, touching yourself? And then there's always these external messages. So what's society feel? And somebody showed me a slide from a marketing conference, and it was so interesting because it's not till sometimes you see data that you realize how true it is. And it was like, what is societally acceptable? So like men's libido and sexuality, like none of us get triggered seeing a Viagra commercial, and some of them are quite funny. And then it went into like menstruation, pregnancy, birth control. And the very last one that is the least societally accepted, and this was in marketing terms, women's libido and sexuality. So we don't even get this from the media or the messages from third parties that are paid to do messaging that it's okay. So, and then depending what you were raised in for religion, which is part of my life that was impacted. I was raised in Catholicism, and Catholicism does not approve of sexuality or birth control, and you should only be doing sexuality to reproduce and live happily ever after. So there's so many moving parts, and I'm only covering some of them. I'm not even getting into trauma and what someone may have experienced from a traumatic perspective in sexuality, but you shut down those parts of you. And I end up in the most fascinating conversations with people. I recently met a woman when I was in New York, and she lives in California, and she proudly told me she was banned from the state of Florida. And I'm like, what do you have to do to get banned from the state of Florida?
Not that much anymore.
I love me a trip to Miami, Phantom. I'm not going to lie. So she shared that it was some paper she wrote. And it was, of course, it was either LGBTQ friendly, or I'm not sure. It doesn't take a lot to get banned in the US. And so then I asked her, I said, okay, I'm Canadian, you're American. We're different, but similar. And I said, if you could take a magic wand, change one thing in neurological programming of women in the US that you think would tip the country for the better, what would you do? And it took her a few minutes, and I gave her like a couple categories, and her top one was religious programming. That if you could take the patriarchal religious programming out of women's brains and the influence that has on your politics, your media, all of those things, that you would completely change the country. And it was interesting because then she reversed the question to me. And we do have those issues in Canada. I don't find they're as extreme, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I can only speak for myself. Mine was women's body issues. And so if we all loved and cared for ourselves, had self-worth, and didn't have hang-ups about our bodies, I think that would tip how women feel and the empowerment they'd feel towards themselves here in Canada. And it's my experience in what I do, working with half-naked women all day. So it's very, very interesting to see energetically what happens to women when they have to look at their bodies, or you're in the room with them and they're half naked. And you see that.
I think there's a lot of, what I found is, like, I started the podcast initially talking to female singer-songwriters.
Okay.
Because I felt like they weren't being paid attention to. That, like, in music, men were always like the people who would only talk to the male rock stars, right? They wouldn't want to talk to the men, the male-centered groups. And I said, well, why don't I start a show that mostly talks to women creators? And still today, to this day, even though I've expanded beyond music, I still have a leaning toward women creators, whether they're CEOs, a therapist, or, authors, just because I feel like in America, there is this kind of patriarchal, kind of top-down, male-centered mindset. And I don't like it. Being in a minority myself, I felt like it's very limiting. Even the music is like if you think about a lot in music, like a lot of the art forms in music are kind of created by African Americans, right, in America.
I learned so much about this.
jazz,
Okay,
rock.
Phantom, we don't have the same African American population here in Canada, so I've never been exposed, and I probably live in some of the most Caucasian parts of Canada, being in the prairies. Like your people didn't want to migrate here, and I don't blame them. But I spent time in Memphis and Nashville last year, and early this year. I learned so much about the influence of African American music culture on all the music I listened to. I had no idea. And Motown out of
Yeah.
Detroit. I feel like I got a PhD in the past year on how much influence there was. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's just interesting because even you get these like icons that there was this controversy like Rolling Stone magazine and
Hmm.
the main editor,
What was the controversy?
like
I don't know about
rock and
this.
roll was founded by like, yeah, there was a big controversy because he didn't think that he needed to talk to African American music talent because he
Interesting.
felt like they weren't going to be articulate enough for him to talk to. When the whole
Wow.
foundation of rock and roll is from like Lead Belly and Robert Johnson, so there's a massive outrage. Then that like it's like all these musical genres in the U.S. from like the blues to Delta blues, to jazz, rock, hip hop, EDM, electronic. It's
Yes.
all kind of you can tie it to African American influence, and then he was only one to
Yes.
talk to the John Lennons and the McCartneys and the Bruce Springsteens,
That's
and
so
not talk
interesting.
to Curtis Mayfield and not talk to all these other people that were
Hmm.
innovators because he kind of had this bias that they wouldn't be literate, and it's the same kind of bias with like female
Okay.
songwriters. Is like, oh, you don't need to talk to them because it's still the bias is like Lennon, McCartney, and Springsteen, Bowie, and
Of
Jagger. Is like,
course.
well, why? Why do you have to have it kind of top down? And it all comes down again to the sexuality expressed by the Rolling Stones. Well, that's okay, right? But if like a woman comes, like a Liz Phair, in the U.S., she was very
Hmm.
explicit in her mindset and her lyrics.
Right. I
Wasn't
mean, look
as
at
accepted as
Madonna.
when Jagger does it. It's
Right.
like, yeah, it's not accepted. When Lady Gaga does it versus Jagger or Bowie doing it, or even Freddie Mercury doing it. Why is that? It's kind of like that implicit bias.
It's so true.
And sometimes women are kind of controlling the bias themselves, that they're self-limiting.
Hmm. Oh,
And it's
there's
like when you just said, like, if you free yourself of that in your mindset, you free yourself of that self-limitation, then you
it's
find
so
that
true.
you can get very powerful. You can get a lot of things done
I
in
know,
your
and
life.
it's interesting because I think even when I share this, what you're coming with this knowledge, we've never spoken before today. You can tell it puts people, like, it shocks people that that is like a domino or a ripple effect on women, because yeah, so long, even what you're sharing and how, look how intertwined that is. If you compare to how Rolling Stone treated music and women's sexuality, it's incredible that these women had to do like shocking things, or like, that's why, sorry, I use Madonna a lot as an example, but to get
Yeah.
that, but then eventually people be like, okay, to turn it into what's the big deal. But there's a fear factor, I believe, too, to like the men in power thinking that women are sexually empowered. Like, I'm not saying all men, but
Yeah, yeah.
how some of
Because it's
them lean in the
patriarchy, yeah,
US.
the tax patriarchy. Yeah, they
Right.
can't control it.
Right.
But yeah, if
So
you wanna be the
exactly.
center, if they're the center, anybody who challenges the center is always gonna be a problem. Like if
Hmm.
when it's just like that's always been the issue. It's like that's the issue we're having in America right now, is that this there's the whole mindset. The world is changing demographically, ethnically, sexually,
Yes.
and there's certain people that had a structure and they were in charge. And they don't like
Hmm.
the fact that now women can be in charge, and people who are you have different sexuality can have rights, and that idea, which is like, what does that matter to you, right? But it matters to them
Yes.
because it's a patriarchy, it's a
And
structure,
and it's from a
and I get
fear-based
it because I
place.
was yeah, because I'm a sociology major
No,
and a
amazing.
political science double major, and the idea is like, well, there's a macrocosm and there's a microcosm. So the microcosm of your religious upbringing affects,
Hmm.
it's cross it's a cross pollination. Like if you have this
Yes.
strict societal structure, right? That's cultural, it's socioeconomic and religious and all these things. Your microcosm and the macrocosm, they're kind of two-way streets. So if you've grown up in a certain culture that has certain class dynamics, it controls things, and like your mindsets are go both ways. And so the individual and the group is very
Mm-hmm.
connected. And some people think, well, words don't matter and these things don't connect, and they don't think about the holistic nature of the interconnectedness of things. And they don't understand like there's cause and effect.
Of course.
so so if they don't put all these pictures together, they think it's like, "Well, I can just do this in isolation and it doesn't matter. I can say this thing and it doesn't matter to people. I can say, well, these
Mm-hmm.
people, shouldn't have this, and you shouldn't think this way." And then they don't understand the dynamics of, like you said, like there's a holistic nature of yourself. Like if you deny your sexuality, you'll deny your other things in your life. If you
Of
deny
course.
certain mindsets, it's because you're not just one thing. You're mind, body, soul, heart. If
Mm-hmm.
you deny one thing, it affects the other things. People don't piece it
It's
together.
completely interconnected, all like individualistically and then as a whole and in society. This is so true. And it's interesting because not only do like people will shut down what they are as essential beings, but even if some relationships will start off sexual, no matter what orientation people may be. And I get shocked about how many committed relationships, marriages, whatever partnerships they are, end up in sexless relationships. And I'm a huge fan of
Mm,
Esther Perel's work. And she even says, she's like, okay, we can live without sex, but we can't live without touch. And all of that leads to connection. So essentially, then what happens, even in your two-person relationship, is you're so disconnected from each other, but then societally, you don't want to make decisions because then you'll be judged.
yeah.
There's a book that I love. I haven't read all of it, but I've read a lot of excerpts from it. And it's The Five Regrets of the Dying. And it was written by a hospice nurse in Europe. And the number one regret of the dying, and I remember this even on hard days, I try to align, like, is this in alignment with this? So I don't end up on my deathbed with this regret, is I wish I would have lived a life that was true to myself and not what I felt others wanted of me. And
Oh, yeah.
I I know the fear it takes and the courage and how hard some of the decisions I have made in life are to keep that aligned. And it's not that I haven't felt the judgment of others around me because of decisions I've made, but I'm being true to myself. And when you can be true to yourself, then you can be true to others.
So much obligation. So many people stay in
Yes.
situations, a lot of codependency. People feel like, oh, well, I'm responsible
Hmm.
for this person's happiness, or they're responsible for my happiness.
Yes.
And then they don't want to, they care about what the family says, they care about what the church says, they care about what this group
Mm,
says. So they're not happy. And they
yes.
stay in things that are, and then you wonder why, like again, at the microcosm and the macrocosm, if you have all these people who are unhappy, well, they're probably agitated, they probably get aggressive, they're probably not negative. And I'm a Buddhist. It's like if you have negativity, then
Hmm.
it's a law of attraction. It would draw negativity.
Of
And what
course
we
it
see
does.
today is a lot of negative actions, at least in the Western society, but in America itself, we look at the microcosm of America. We have all these unsatisfied, unhappy, dysfunctional
Yes.
situations, and we wonder why society is
Yes.
having problems. Well, it's having problems
And
because in the
then,
microcosm, people aren't happy,
and this is
bleeding
my
into the
passion,
macrocosm, and you wonder
Phantom. It's so true.
why we have
And
all
it's,
these issues.
and then we're trying to fill them with money, assets, things, statuses, designation. Like, I've chased that stuff too. And that was part of my wall where I'm like, shouldn't this stuff make me feel happier? And those are the things that are societally acceptable. And I'm going to be, oh, wow, look, Phantom just got a private jet. Phantom just got a new house. That's incredible. But then there's also people sticking needles in their arms, drinking, doing drugs, that don't want to feel the things that are in them. And this is exactly, I was actually just in a conversation this morning with someone about this. And I said, of course, we're going to judge alcoholism. And I said, but when your neighbor has 23 Amazon boxes on their front doorstep, they're no different. Instead of drinking, they're
Yeah,
using
they got
online
an addiction.
shopping. There's something they
Yeah.
don't want to feel.
Some
Yes,
addictive behavior. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Everybody's trying to numb themselves with something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the people who actually self-actualize and become comfortable, then people are like, "Well, how did they get there?" Well,
Yes.
because they stopped caring about what you thought, right? They
Mm-hmm.
started thinking about and it's people say, "Well, that's selfish." Well, at some point, you have to care about yourself. And people
This is
look at
true.
that, well, that's arrogant. And they wonder, well, how is that person getting to where they because there's a certain level of self-love that people perceive as arrogant and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's like off-putting. It's like, well, for that person to be who they have to accept who they are, and then they don't have to just be what you want them to be. And that's the
Right?
problem. So many people are trying to fit in. They're trying to just
Mm-hmm.
go with what the crowd tells them to be. The
Right.
pressure, the peer pressure, the societal pressure to fit in. And
Oh,
I'm
this is
around
it.
a lot of people with, oddballs, really creative. I was always hanging around with the nerds or
I
the
love it.
people who were doing weird, different things, and we weren't always accepted
And
because
of
it's
course
like,
not.
okay, I didn't really care about being accepted. I cared about, like, being true to what my muse was or what the
Mm-hmm.
universe was telling me, and it doesn't always gonna let me fit in because that wasn't going with what the flow was. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, following the lead alpha and doing exactly what the alpha said everybody should do. It's like, "No, I'm not doing that because I'm doing what I wanna do."
I
And
love
and
it.
that is not usually the rest, people wanna follow.
Depending what time in life. So that's interesting because it's always the oddballs and weirdos that end up doing incredible things. Like, and this isn't saying how I feel about any of these
Yeah,
people, but look at Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Richard Branson. Like, these people were not trying to fit in anything they were doing.
yeah.
And these are the ones that end up
Usually that's what
doing
happens.
crazy, incredible things. Yeah. And it's interesting because the more I started studying authenticity as well, and I always had this in me, I just couldn't verbalize why I felt the way I did. And even from a young age, I remember there'd be a clothing trend, and some of this would have been like 80s and 90s. And I was like, oh, I
Mhm.
don't like those shirts. They're ugly. I don't want a shirt like that. But everyone would buy one to fit in. And that ties to our need to connection. But I remember just thinking, like, why would I buy that if I don't like it? And so very early, I started getting these whispers of authenticity, but it wasn't till adulthood that you're like, you know what? The pain of fitting in and being someone that I'm not is much more painful, again, than being who I am to my true essence and opening up and blooming. But it's and the deeper teachings that I've had recently and through life experience as well as in theory is when you fully accept yourself, who you are, all the parts, what your being is, what ignites you, what disappoints you, then you can do that for another person. But most people aren't
Yeah,
self connected. So I can't fully connect to another person if I don't connect to myself. And
yeah,
no matter what uncomfortable thing comes up, I always have a phone in my hand to take me to another place. And so this, I don't think is going to help us at all. I still like people laugh when we think about when did you not have a phone now? Like even I think 10 years ago, I don't think I had a phone. And now that
yeah.
thing's
Well, I
there
was a
all the
child in the
time.
'70s, I didn't have that stuff, I remember.
Right?
Well, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the problem I have yeah, I mean, the thing I have that I'm really, worried about is, like, social media, the young
Yes.
people who are getting kinda
Oh
bullied
boy.
into trying to be like all the influencers and trying
Mm-hmm.
to get in the algorithm, like, I gotta have 1,000 likes. Well, why? Because, like,
Likes.
do you really yeah, well, you look at what is being liked, all the cat videos with the same song behind them, getting
So true.
1,000,000,000 views. Is that just because it got 1,000,000,000 views, that means it's
I
good?
know. I
But my
know.
whole
Don't
point
get me
is
started
it
on cat videos, Phantom.
yeah. Well, I have a cat. I love cats, but I'm like, the
I
idea
love
the
cats
problem
too. Mm.
with the algorithm, the idea that you're not worthy unless you get 1,000,000 likes or
I
1,000
know.
views
I
or
know. The
and
like
then they teach his
dopamine.
kids like, well,
Mhm.
you can't put anything out there if it gets 1 or 2 likes, then
Yes.
you're no good.
Yes.
And the
Even
idea that you gotta use AI to develop
and
everything
the
because you can't be
filters,
original, because you gotta get that
right?
algorithm. Yeah, you
Hmm.
gotta get the algorithm to
The
trigger,
latest,
so then
the
nobody comes up
latest.
with original ideas.
This is so true. Even like I work sometimes with external agencies for my businesses, and that's why they show us more of this. And then the one interesting thing that I did have a good chuckle about, because this stuff isn't meaningful to me. I love to see what my friends are up to, what their kids are up to, the milestones and celebrations they're sharing. I love travel photos. Um, but they were showing me that anytime I shared a heartfelt, authentic message to any of our business pages, it got the most analytics. And I said, I can do more of that, but it still has to be authentic. I said, I'm not going to start creating stuff that's not true or chat GPTing it just to get analytics. I said, if I don't believe in the message
Hmm.
I'm sharing, I'm not doing it. So that was interesting, but no. And then filters, it's scary how now you don't know what a real person looks like. And these recent
Oh,
rebels,
yeah, 'cause they're
these
fake.
Hollywood babes, Pamela Anderson, Justine Bateman, they're either like not dyeing their hair, not wearing makeup. This is the latest rebel thing on the
Yeah,
red
the
carpet. And I
rebel
love
thing
it.
is to not, yeah.
Show us
Yeah,
what
well,
real
it's
women look
so,
like.
yeah, because it's like there's so much fake, there's so many things you can do that aren't
Hmm.
really you, right? And you can put on these masks, and, people put on masks, that's what we do. But
Of
the
course.
level of mask capability that
Hmm.
you can do today where you're not even you at all,
Yes.
right? And you're
Yes.
projecting all this stuff and you're using all these tools. It's just like, well, how do you get to the real? Like, if you're gonna present yourself on a dating site, you're not even anything
Oh,
like what you present, you know,
the
and then you
apps.
present yourself like on your job because AI modified your resume, and it's not really,
Hmm.
you didn't do it, the AI did it. And it's like,
That's true.
well, who are you? And so my whole issue is like people are so scared of being authentically
Yes.
themselves because they don't want to get rejected.
This is so true.
But
They don't want to get rejected. They don't want to hurt people. And we have this innate want and need for connection. But it's very interesting. There's a divorce lawyer from New York that someone introduced me to his recent work. He's doing podcasts and he's on all these podcasts. And so he talks about divorce and prenuptial agreements and things. James Sexton. And even he touches on all this of like what people will always ask him. Well, how do people end up in your office? And he's like, lack of connection. But even what we're talking about, he's like, when you can't go and be truly who you are with your spouse, you're ending up in my office. And one of the ironic things that he even shares that I love, he's like, you know who doesn't end up back in my office? He's like, people come in, they have open, honest, vulnerable discussions about prenuptial agreements. Very difficult conversation. You're talking about how you would split assets should you get divorced before you're even married. And he's like, if those ones can have the hard conversations, he's like, I never see them again. And then he's like, the ones that fought through it or didn't want to talk about it or it was too uncomfortable, 2 to 3 years, they're back in my office and we need to dust off the prenup. So this is again where authenticity needs to spread itself lovingly throughout the world. And I think we'd have a much different place.
well, it's like, how do you come into your connection? Do you, like, a lot of times people come into a situation and they don't show who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't even know who they are, and they're
Right?
thinking this other person's gonna save them. Well, no
Yeah.
one's
Oh
gonna really
boy.
save you until you, like, take
Mm-mm.
care of yourself. And so if you come into a situation to expecting this other person to fix you, and then
Yes.
you don't tell them what was wrong, so, well, how are they gonna read you if they don't even know what's wrong? You're just thinking, it's like my pop used to go to the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
thinking the doctor could figure out what's wrong with them without saying anything. Well how's that gonna
Typical
work?
guy. Come on.
Well, that's what people do. They get into a relationship, they say, "Well,
Yes.
this person's just gonna know
Yes.
me." Well, how are they gonna know
Hmm.
you if you don't talk?
I know.
If you
I
it's
know.
kinda basic, but it's it's
Yes.
so much what happens is, like, you don't communicate. Well, what's going to happen.
This is so true. And the other piece that it's interesting because when you recover from breakup or separation and things, I remember one of the most poignant things a psychologist said to me. She's like, okay, well, all the things you described in your marriage, and she had counseled both of us together. She's like, I heard from both you how the marriage was and how you describe on your own what your frustrations are, what's in the marriage, what your relationship is like with your husband. You don't like any of them. So she's like, but where we get hung up is on the idea of what we think it could be. We don't want to accept what it actually is. And we create these dreams or these fantasies that we keep chasing, and it keeps us in the relationship that it could be like this, if only, if only. And recently a girlfriend of mine said to me, I laughed because I thought it was quite a close-minded comment for how intelligent she is. She's like, oh, so like marriage counseling doesn't work, hey? And I'm like, why would you say that? And she's like, well, you ended up separated like twice from, and you said you were in marriage counseling. And I said, it works beautifully because I got to learn who I am. I got to grow. And it was 2 times in marriage counseling sessions. Well, the second time I wasn't married, but we lived together, that I hit a point and I remember thinking, this is this person's capacity. Like this person is giving me all they are capable of giving me. And it's not enough. I don't want this. I want something deeper. I want something connected. And we both bring stuff to the table. We both bring challenges. It's not about blame. I have my own shit that ends up in relationship too. But I do remember it was in those points that I'm like, okay, I can have this, or I can go and hopefully find someone I'm more aligned with. And so, yeah, I just feel it helps grow and
you have
people
to know.
learn.
I mean,
but you have to have that growth
they
sense.
never,
yes.
they don't, I think they don't want to know. Some
No.
people don't want to know.
Oh God, no.
They want to
They don't
stay in
want
the
to, the car's on fire, but they want to keep the roof closed, the hood closed.
It's just staying there. You're going to get burned. You know, it's like, it's going to get burned. It's like it's going to hurt. I mean, because the problem is people don't want to get hurt, but it's going to hurt. Like if you stay in a codependent relationship, you're too scared to get out of it.
Yes.
But it's going to, it hurts in it, and it's going to
Yes.
hurt to get out of it. But it's going to, like, eventually, if you get out of it, you'll grow, right?
It's so
But it's
true.
going to take a leap. It's going to take some work. It's going to hurt. It's not it's not magic. Like people think there's a magic thing that's going to make the pain go away. You know, life is pain. There's always going to be something, right? There's
Yes.
going to be, until you're done. There's no 12-step, right? It's like every day you have to have an increment, something that you can continue to do. You're
And it's
never
interesting
done
because
after
I can't
step
remember.
12, right?
Never.
You're gonna have
right?
to keep on going. And people think they're gonna be done at 12, and you're never done at 12.
And it's funny because I remember having some of these, like some of the beliefs that I laugh now, thanks to pain and growth and healing. Like I also remember, and a lot of my girlfriends laugh, that a lot of times when you start marriage counseling, you're like, okay, let's go there so I can fix my husband. None of this is me. And then even I remember at one point too thinking like, okay, I'll do some self-work. And then eventually it's like a light switch, poof, it's done. And I didn't realize it's like a lifetime commitment, which I'm committed to. But that belief. And then I think the other piece that you're sharing about pain in life, this was shared with me recently. I can't remember how, but even comparing it to music, and I've got my fellow musician on screen here today, it's like piano keys. There's no song with a piano in it that only gets played on the white keys, which is what people think life could be like. Oh, it could only be light and happy and bright. You need the black keys too. And both of them together are what make the song.
Yeah, you gotta play the sharps and the flats.
Yes.
The sharps
And
and the flats, like, it's the dissonance. What people don't, it's the dissonance. That's people don't understand. Harmony is not everything, right? In songs, a lot of times we have to do what is like dissonant and things that are like kind of like microtonal or polyrhythmic things that are a little off. And that's what makes the song, right? The fact that we're not totally in harmony, that there's a little disharmony, there's a little distortion or dissonance is what actually makes it interesting.
And this is relationship.
Like some people just want, I want to be on the happy key.
Right.
The happy key is not gonna it's not gonna work. It doesn't work as a piece, as a
That's why
whole,
I love even how you were
because
saying you
it's
listen to
not
these old
reality.
songs
Reality is that,
that are full of error. And that's exactly relationship. They're beautiful. It's a beautiful love song, but there's a ton of hard stuff in it too.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you're gonna break some eggs. Part of the process, and the problem is we've got tools today that make things perfect. Like I can make a song that has no microtonal errors on my laptop. I
Right.
can make it so it has no polyrhythmic errors. It's totally in time. It's perfect because the machine did it. But then it's
Mm-hmm.
like I don't want to listen to it after I do it because it's like I can go back and listen to something from Lead Belly or listen to something from Paul
Yes.
McCartney or listen to something from Todd Rundgren or anybody in the past, and I can hear that a human being played that and they missed the timing a little bit
I
because
love
they're a
it.
human being and they're gonna miss it
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. And there's
Yes.
something about that person's playing that makes them that's why that is Bootsy Collins. That's why that's Hendrix. That's why that's Dylan. That's their style.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make it perfect, then there's no style and there's no
Exactly.
individuality, there's no character. And that's what
Yes.
people miss. Is like you can't be perfect because it's not gonna be perfect.
There's no
Nothing's
such thing.
perfect.
There's no such thing. And I think this is it. And you think that you're going to marry this person and it's going to be perfection. And then the minute there's imperfections, it's how you deal with it. But it's also two-way. And so this is what it becomes
Yeah.
is you either choose that what you contribute towards it. So one of the expressions I love is I'm 100% responsible for my 50% of the relationship. And if I feel I'm doing everything I can in my part, my contributions as that person's partner, then I can also end them with peace of mind and love.
Yeah. I mean, you just if you don't burn your bridge, right? If you find a way you can communicate and say, "Hey, this is just not connecting, and it's just not that we're not a good fit." And it's like when people want to do the blame game, it's all this person's fault. It's all my
Oh,
fault.
yes.
So you know what? It just didn't work. It didn't work. And sometimes things don't work. Sometimes this something that doesn't connect. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, well, that's the present moment. There could be a different moment. You go to that and you say, okay, I learned from that. You're like a lesson learned. You have a
Yes.
lesson learned and you go from there. And I think people just need to be a little bit more open, because people, I think they stay in a lane. They think everything's going to
Mm-hmm.
be in that lane, and they don't know how to zigzag when something gets in the way. Like when you're driving down the street and something gets an obstacle in the way, you got to zigzag. You got to be able to recover, like a jazz
Yes.
musician, like classical musicians reading the sheet. Everything's got to be on the sheet. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
fusion jazz musician, somebody changes the chord, you can react to it, and the song's not over. You
Right.
actually go somewhere different. And you actually say, wow, that was kind of cool that we went somewhere different. If you
Mm-hmm.
can live your life in that kind of state where you're in the present and you can handle and you can know how to have tools to recover. So you don't have to start all over again. You can go where you are.
Right.
I think that's where
No,
people can learn.
it's true. And I think like even personally, my biggest teachings were leaving blame, self-professed blamer, and starting to look inside and be like, okay, what is it about me? Why am I reacting this way? What's in me that is causing some of this? And most people don't do that. And even recently, it's funny, even in business, I've had a few men react outwardly in ways that were shocking to me because to me the issue was level 2, but the reactions were level 10. I left the conversations and my first thought was, if you talk to me that way, I cannot even imagine how you talk to your wife. And so there's
Yeah.
so many factors and so many moving parts. And the other thing I laugh is that this divorce lawyer who's been sharing a lot, James Sexton, he also says, he's like, this is a technology. He's like, Kate, actual file for divorce, 56% in the US. He's like, and then a good 20% plus stay for the kids, for finances, for whatever the reasons. And so he's like, this is a technology that fails 76% of the time. And 84% of divorced people are remarried in 5 years. So there's still something there that we want, that we crave. And I will not lie. The feeling of being in love, nothing beats it. They've studied it chemically. It's
Yeah,
equivalent. Falling in love is the equivalent to doing cocaine. I've never done
I think people
cocaine, but
want that.
holy cow,
They
that feeling is incredible. But staying in it, that's where the challenge is. And that's the pieces I've done so much work on. And
that's the
I
problem.
still believe in love. I still believe in relationship. I still believe in marriage. And I think it's just that we all need better tools and deeper tools to get there.
But you can't stay in that euphoria 100% of the
No,
time, and then
it'll
people
never.
get the they get this kind of misconception that somehow that first moment when you're in love or the first moment when you're having sex with those moments are going to be always
Yes.
there. And the
Yes.
problem is they're not always there. They sometimes they're fleeting and you want them to be
Mm-hmm.
there and they just don't happen all the time. And there are things in life where you could have your life so those things happen more often if that's what you choose to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to decide what is important in your life. Like, are there things in life that have more importance than that, or that's the only thing? And you have to decide what you want. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people they kind of all over the place in terms of like, what do you want? You have to make you have to make choices and figure out like, do you want to be on a certain path where there's some kind of balance, or there's like you have to be in this state, and
Right.
you make those choices to be where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece, which I always appreciate, is like, even when I know people going through breakups, I'm like, well, do you want to stay with someone that doesn't want to be with you? Now you're freed up to meet someone that wants to be with you and try things differently. And I
Yeah.
think it's our fear, and I get it. I've been
That's
there,
a revolution right there.
right? It was never easy when I ended a relationship. Like it wasn't just like, oh, see you later. But yeah, and the other piece, because you brought up the dating apps, and that it came up recently in another discussion I was in, that before dating apps were so prevalent and easy to use, people, you would break up with someone and you might do more self-reflection and be like, oh, how did I screw up that relationship? What happened? But you can literally be moving out that night and like logging onto a dating app while you're in the hotel room or your new apartment and trying to see what's online and fill that
Yeah.
out. Oh, look, someone new wants me. It's not me. There's a lot of these
Yeah, you can get
technologies
immediate
that have helped,
replacement.
but they hinder.
Me
Yeah.
Also there, they kinda get into that problem where you get into that first date scenario over and over and over
Oh,
because
yes.
it makes you happy, and then you to keep on doing that, and that can do damage because you're putting
Of course.
yourself into this situation like, well, you're just running like Groundhog Day every day. You keep on running the same thing. You keep on going in
This
that
one
real
guy,
rewinding.
yeah, this one guy said the most brilliant thing to me about it. He said, he said the one thing that's always scary about the dating apps, and he was saying this like self-admittedly, he's like, it's like a dopamine fueled video game, but you forget what the point of the game is, which is to
Mm,
meet someone, connect, and end up in relationship. Because there's such a high to someone liking you or swiping right on you or the first few conversations because they aren't deep and connected. And
yeah.
and yeah, and there was recently, I follow this thing with movie quotes, and I think it was either Before Sunset or Before Sunrise with Ethan Hawke, and I forget his co-star's name, but um, there's this quote that's like, we think we're going to meet all these people in life that we have deep connection with, but when we meet them, we should cherish it because it actually doesn't happen that often that
Yeah.
we meet someone
Yeah.
and there's a close connected relationship with them. Swiping, first dates, all that stuff, 100%. You can have that till the cows come home. Those are the happy meals of life. They're cheap, they're quick. They're not amazing, but you can get them through the drive-through. But the 7-course dinners aren't as common.
Yeah, soulmates, you don't always find soulmates. You might find several in your life, and some people think
Hmm.
there might be only one, but I've heard, I've talked to people like, well, yeah, you could actually meet several soulmates in your lifetime,
I believe that. I do.
but they're
And it's
not
also
gonna
where
happen
you
all the
are in
time.
life.
It's not gonna
No,
happen all the time. Some people, yeah,
It's like, what stage of your
Definitely.
life, what age, what have you learned? And that's why even I share with people, I'm like, I got married, I think at 27. And like what I thought marriage was at 26, 27, what I thought it took to be in a committed relationship, none of that is valid today. Like, there's values.
Mm.
Like, do I believe you
Yeah,
need to
where
not
you
cheat
are.
on the person, trust, loyalty, commitment? Sure, there's some deep values I still see there, but the day-to-day tools, how to handle another person, that you both need to be doing inner work, and how it affects that, what children do to a mate. There's so many moving parts that I'm like, no way could you, like, I don't
Yeah.
believe that you can stay in that unless you're both continuously growing and evolving together. And in my opinion, people will often ask me, and it's funny because I think it's still an optimistic, generous one. I believe about 5% of relationships, both people are super happy, feel fulfilled, growth minded. Like, I'd say 5% of couples are having amazing relationships that I would look at and be like, yeah, me too. I would love that. And the rest of
Yeah.
them, it doesn't take much to dig and see where the issues are.
Well, it's a rare thing that you actually connect because sometimes people, when they first connect, they got these misconceptions and they came to it and they weren't being fully honest with themselves or other people,
Mhm.
even with them, even with the other person. So once they get into it for the long haul, you start to uncover where there's a lot of cracks.
Of
There's a
course.
lot of issues. It's like, and so like
Yes.
the people who actually come to the table fully disclosing everything is probably rare, and
It's
that you
true.
actually fully see who that
And
person is, and
and
that's
if
probably
you do
why.
that and that person loves you still, that's the foundation of an amazing relationship.
Yeah,
Not,
I think that's
I'm gonna
why it's
hide
rare.
this stuff, and eventually it comes up. Like, there was a video I remember seeing, and it was this woman in a pool holding 6 beach balls under her. You can only do that for so long. Eventually those beach balls come up, and now you're gonna deal with
Yeah,
them with kids and debt and pets and 2 people working full time. Do it in the beginning. And which is, again, going back to the example of when 2 people can walk in, have a discussion about a prenuptial agreement. And I love that he's like, I'm never seeing them again in my office. So that's
yeah.
the
I mean, if
stuff
you come
that,
to the table like an open book and you're not hiding, and it's hard
yes,
to do that. A lot of people they
it
gotta
is.
hide things, and it's just
And
for their own
we have
protection.
fear,
Like everybody does that
shame.
for their own
Hmm.
self protection and like certain
Yes,
things, and so it's hard to get to that 5% because like you're kind of stopping yourself.
of
Everybody's
course.
stopping themselves because they're not in the state that they really need to be. So you're
Hmm.
not in your totally like evolved state until a certain point. And most people are getting into the relationships when they're not anywhere near that.
Right.
So okay, well, of course, it's gonna have issues,
Of course.
but
And you don't know how the
it's
other person's going to
always
react.
amazing how we. Yeah,
Yes,
you never. That's another unknown.
I know. The
But
other interesting thing
we
someone
always.
taught me, sorry, the
Yeah,
other thing someone taught me too, and it made so much sense when and not just in romantic relationship, but in life, is people can only hold space for you and what you're going to share with them as far and as deep as they have gone themselves. So if
yeah,
you come to me and you start bringing up that you survived some capital T trauma stuff in your life, but so have I, and I've done work on it, and it's not just triggering my capital T trauma, or I've done other work that might not be capital T trauma. I've done deep work and regulated emotions and learned psychology and neuroscience, and I can be a container for you. That's a much different experience than someone getting squirmy, shutting it down, changing the subject, and walking away. So it's also who's on the receiving end.
yeah. It's definitely it's like if you're not like at this state where you can even address your inner child issues, right? That you haven't even
Oh, yes.
tapped into that, and you're
Right.
walking into the door without even opening that door, right? And you've got it
Hmm.
shut with the lock on it and the deadbolt on it, and then like the other person's already worked on that and then you didn't. And then,
Those don't
okay,
well,
well,
work
yeah, you
together
got the
either.
capital T. Yeah, you got
Yes,
the capital T, but you didn't even open the door. You didn't even crack the door.
I
You got
know.
locks on
I
the door.
know. It's so
So it's
true.
like, where's that
I
gonna go?
laugh.
Where's that
My friends always laugh because I do end up meeting a lot of deep people because I'm deep and open and I love deep connection. So I was telling them that if I meet someone in a romantic situation that they're divorced or separated or their last partnerships ended, which is pretty normal at this age. My first question will be like, what do you think you did or how did you contribute to that relationship not working out? And that question alone, if they can answer it open, honest, and vulnerably, is the most incredible one that I get the most insight right off the bat. Like, okay, this is someone that's self-aware. They've done some work. They understand that they were part of it. And then you get the blamers. Well, she cheated. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
sure you had
yeah, but
nothing to
she
do
cheated,
with
that's it.
the,
That's it.
yes, that's always
It
the
had
out.
nothing to do
Yeah.
with it.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, if they didn't do anything that they can
No.
remember,
Yes.
and it's all the other
Yes.
person, then it's like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
walk out the door, so bye."
It's so interesting, Phantom. Like, I love it. But I love like my passion. That's like people will be like, what are you passionate about? I'm like, my passion is truly people. As you would know, being your 1000th guest, like people are the most interesting things in life. If they're open, like I sometimes meet closed people that there's not as much coming out of them. Doesn't mean they're not interesting. It's just they're not as open to share.
Yeah,
And I love meeting interesting people. And the rebels, the odd ones, the quirkies, they're always the most interesting ones. And I used to probably live in more awe of people. A younger version of myself, a less healed version of myself, probably lived in awe of these people that have these like perfect looking lives. Everything
yeah.
looks amazing, especially with the bullshit on social media nowadays. And now the more I see perfection, the more I question, like, ooh, what's in them?
Yeah, son under there.
If they
There's
want to
son
appear
under
that perfect, there has to be something deeper there.
yeah, there's something going on there. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, there's always like, the detective, like, I'm gonna be a Columbo. I'm gonna look it out. I'm gonna look, try to figure
Right?
it out.
And it's so hard. It's so hard not to see that stuff once you've opened it in your own world that you're like, okay, okay, just let it go. But yeah.
But I wanna thank you for being we actually hit our
Thank you,
mark.
Phantom.
We're actually going over.
Yes. Thank you, Phantom. There's something interrupting. I don't know. I can hear. Can you hear this buzzing? Give me 1 second. Sorry. I'm not sure why we got interference. Sorry. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. 1 second.